Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar for the integrity features of the web-based school meal application. I'm Tim Weblow. I'm a program analyst here at USDA FNS. I'm part of the Office of Program Integrity, and I have some of my other teammates here who will be helping out when we get to Q&As. So let's get kicked off. Okay, so in November, USDA released a prototype web-based school meal application. We conducted a webinar in December on that application. This webinar has a much different focus. If you're interested in learning more about our application, that webinar, Getting to Know USDA's Web-Based Prototype Application for Free and Reduced Price School Meals, was recorded and is available on the FNS website. Today's webinar is focused on the integrity features that are the backbone of that application. Because while we completely understand that there is a wide array of online applications that are already available for SFAs, we believe that updating those existing applications with integrity features, such as the ones we'll present today, could help reduce the kinds of errors that are commonly found on school meal applications. Our research tells us people omit income sources on their applications. The income interview that we will discuss in detail on this webinar takes direct aim at addressing that error. We know that program integrity is important to everyone, which is why we want to take time to focus on this one aspect of our application. We're not sure we've made it clear just how critical we think improving the ways income questions are asked are to improving program integrity. The income interview is just one of many integrity features of USDA's prototype web-based school meal application. To learn more about the rest of the features in our prototype, please view the resources on our website. And with that, let's talk about our income interview. We used information from a recent USDA study, the Access, Participation, Eligibility, and Certification Study, or APEC-2, and feedback from states, SFAs, and schools to identify the errors that we targeted with the integrity features of this application. Let's talk for a minute about what we know about school meal application errors. Researchers selected a nationally representative sample of over 4,100 households that were either approved or denied for free or reduced price meals. The research team conducted in-person guided interviews with each household by asking a series of income questions. Household responses to the guided interview were then compared to the answers on the application the household originally submitted. The two primary sources of error identified in APEC-2 were misreporting income and household size. And as you know, those errors may result in over-certification, receiving a benefit that the household is not eligible for, or under-certification, not receiving a benefit that that household is eligible for. We are all committed to improving program integrity, and simply reducing the number of income and household size reporting errors could make a huge difference. 1 in 5 kids in the APEC-2 study was certified incorrectly. About 2/3 of those kids were over-certified, while the other third was not getting a meal benefit that it should have been getting. The good news is that we have heard from a handful of SFAs and states that are already looking at ways to incorporate some of these integrity features in their applications, and we're hoping that that trend will continue. You're all familiar with the standard income questions on many applications, most of which are following the FNS paper application as a model. There are 3 broad income categories: earnings from work, public assistance, child support, alimony, and pensions, retirement, all other. More detailed instructions for income sources within those categories are included in the fine print in the application, but that assumes people are finding, reading, and understanding the necessary content. Our work with parents and school administrators tells us that many people don't read directions and rely heavily upon the clues from the text of the application to know what information should be included. A web-based application allows us the flexibility of providing better and more detailed questions and interactive help while keeping the burden as low as possible for our respondents. And unlike many web-based applications, ours takes full advantage of its environment with its income interview. An application that simply replaces a paper form on a web-based platform is like a fillable PDF of the federal 1040. Think about how much easier it is to use the latest tax software and its income interview to complete your taxes. That should help you imagine the potential for an online school meal application. We based the income questions in our web application on the household survey in the APEC 2 study. We know that the APEC 2 interview was able to generate more complete and accurate responses from households. And using that as a model, we believe that our detailed income interview will also help to generate better income information from families. As a result, our income questions are more detailed than any paper or existing web application, at least among the ones that we've been able to find and review. Those features also happen to be the most important feature of our web-based prototype. So let's walk through what we were thinking when we came up with our income questions. First, we think it's important to point out that there are no differences in the income sources that applicants are required to report, whether there are 3 income categories or there are more detailed categories. The standard for eligibility is no different regardless of the structure or quality of the application. The benefit to having the level of detail that our income survey has is that through asking about each income type, households don't forget to report an income source, and importantly, we can prompt for income sources that they might not have known were supposed to be included. For example, applicants may know to include child support, but forget when they are going through the application, versus applicants who did not know that child support counts as income. Second, the individual income types require an affirmative response. In other words, the applicant has to say that she does have income from a given source, and then will be prompted for the amount and frequency. Or she has to affirm that she does not have income from a specified source. That said, we have heard that there are some concerns that our current income interview is too long. We hope to be able to explain that we think this application may be easier and less time-consuming than its counterparts. While there may be more questions for households, by providing greater detail, we are able to delete any guesswork on the part of the applicant. Remember, our goal is to find ways to make it more likely that households are correctly filling out their information. And as we said, we know that from many, the 3 standard income categories are not resulting in complete and accurate information. Our initial income screen has 7 questions. Actually, we're going to first, sorry, I got ahead of myself. We're going to take a look at the income interview now. So our initial income screen has 7 questions, 1 question about military service, and 6 income questions, with the next screens triggered by the responses from the household. So applicants only get additional questions that pertain to their answers to these 7 questions. And each adult earner in the household answers the income questions separately. And although we are keying in on questions we develop, we want to stress that we're not saying that this is what an application has to look like, as in this specific set of questions or in this order. Rather, we're more interested in finding ways to help households accurately report their information in whatever form that takes. Looking at the first income screen, we want to highlight 3 of the income features that we adopted based on what we've learned, not only from our studies, but from focus groups and conversations with people just like you in the states and SFAs. First, APEC 2 tells us that families are more likely to leave off an income source entirely than to misreport an income amount. Using 6 detailed income questions with additional prompts about countable income should help families to more accurately report all of their income sources, whether it be an income they forgot or an income they didn't know counted. Second, APEC 2 suggests that requiring an affirmative yes/no answer is likely to increase complete and accurate reporting and reduce the chance of reporting errors. Leaving a field blank makes it easier for applicants to simply not include an income source intentionally. By answering no to an income source, applicants are attesting that they do not have income from that source. Finally, people are often confused about gross and net income. We have provided an easy-to-understand definition right on the page that helps applicants know the correct numbers to report. Simply clicking on the question mark in the blue circle opens a small window that helps the applicant report the correct numbers. What if a web application takes advantage of the web platform by including drop-down menus for income sources, as in this example here? Well, even an exhaustive list of income sources would fall short because it would not require an affirmative yes/no response to every source, again, making it too easy to omit an income source. We have a couple of examples for you to consider. Let's start with our applicant, Joe. He answered that he was in the military and had no additional sources of income. So he answered no to the remaining 6 questions, 6 income questions on the initial screen. The next screen that Joe sees then has 3 specific questions to people serving in the military. To carry out the example further, let's say he replied that he has incomes in all 3 types of military pay: basic pay, cash bonus, and military allowance. This screen also shows you an example of the pop-up help, here describing military housing allowances. No more going to separate instructions. By answering yes, income and frequency boxes appear for each of the income sub-questions. And it's worth noticing that the income frequencies are in plain language now, replacing the frequencies that confuse just about everyone, bi-monthly and bi-weekly. If Joe is the only adult in the household with income, then with his set of income questions answered, Joe is taken directly to a screen that lets him know he's almost done and asks him for the next block of information, reporting the last 4 digits of his Social Security number, or checking no if he has no Social Security number. If there are other adult earners in the household, they will report their incomes before they move on to that next section. And just as a quick aside, we want to specifically point out that the Social Security question is only asked of income applicants. If the application is not based on income, applicants won't get this screen. Let's look at another example. Oh, behind the slide. Sorry about that. Our slides got out of sync. So let's look at another example. Here, Joe affirms that he has earnings from work, but no other income sources from the initial list. Since Joe answered yes to that question, he's prompted to answer 5 questions about the income that fall within the earnings from work category, that is salary or wages, tips, commission, cash bonuses, and net income from self-employment. As with the previous example, Joe will say yes or no to each of those 5 questions individually and a box for filling out the dollar amount and frequency will appear under each answer. Joe will continue to answer these more detailed income questions for any income source he's answered yes to. Likewise for other adult earners in the household. At a high level, this income interview may seem more burdensome than the traditional 3 income categories, but the benefit to the applicant in terms of the ease of filling out the application far outweighs the perception of length. The bottom line, we like our application. There was science and deliberate thought that went into every comma, the size and placement of fonts and buttons, and even the color choices. But we know that there may be a variety of formats for applications that will work as well or better. But what we like even better than our application are the integrity features of the application. Based on everything we know about how people fill out school meal applications, we think the more detailed income questions will do a better job at getting at correct income sources and income amounts than anything that currently exists. Remember we mentioned that applicants also made errors in reporting who is in their household. We also made changes to the questions about who is in their household that we think will help them do a better job of including everyone who should be listed. The household screen includes prompts for family members that we know are often left off the application, like kids attending other schools, kids who haven't started school yet, and even infants. We also have a section that prompts the applicant to include adults that are commonly left off of applications, such as kids away at college or in the military. As with the income section, the household questions also include pop-up and sliding help for immediate access to definitions and instructions. There is a new child's income section, too, that incorporates the integrity features we've been talking about, like easy-to-access definitions, and an affirmative response to the question whether the student has income. And one of the best features of the child income section is that now applicants can answer questions for each student rather than having to calculate incomes from all their children and reporting them in a single field. So to wrap things up, the biggest takeaway from this webinar is that we think that guided income questions have the potential to be a game changer for helping applicants completely and accurately fill out their school meals application. And these, or similarly detailed questions, can be included in applications SFAs are already using, or can be made part of the requirement for new applications. We applaud all of the efforts that state agencies and SFAs are taking to reduce error in school meal applications. We're sure that the lessons we've learned about the things that trip families up in filling out their school meal applications can help states and SFAs create or adopt new applications to help reduce the number of children who are incorrectly certified. With that, thank you so much for attending. We're going to move on to Q&A. I'd like to mention briefly that earlier I mentioned you can find the rest of our resources on our website. And here's our email address as well. We'll provide the slides as well as the recording of this webinar will be available on FNS's website. So if the audio dropped for any reason or if you were unable to attend, you'll be able to get the information that we presented today. So we're going to move on to questions. And as I mentioned when we kicked off, the rest of the team is here, so you may hear some other voices take part in the Q&A. Yep. We just got a question about if the presentation will be emailed. We'll definitely do that. I just want to let everybody know we're reviewing your questions that you're sending in. So we got a question here. Is there a common template, or do we have to build our own or upon our own? And the answer to that is that our code is open source, available to all for free. You're welcome to take the code and use the application as it stands. Of course, you'll have to build some structure around it in terms of supporting systems, possibly a login feature, as well as a database to be able to store the applicant's information. You're also welcome to just, as I mentioned in the webinar, you can promote these integrity features with your current vendor or a future vendor.
This is Whitney. Hello. We got a question about trying the application with real families and whether we have future plans to do that. And just to a little bit of background that, during the development of both the paper application and this web-based application, we did talk to families. We went into schools and piloted it with them and got feedback from parents. So that has been done. Of course, you can never really test things enough. So we are looking at continuing to do testing in the future, but we have already done pretty extensive testing with parents and families.
Thanks, Whitney. We got another question here. What occurs when a parent does not enter the last 4 digits of the Social Security number? So as I mentioned in the webinar, only some applicants are presented with that question. So only if you're filling out an income application will you be presented with submitting either your last 4 digits as your Social Security number or checking the box that you do not have one. Just like the income interview requiring affirmative answers, so too does the Social Security page. The applicant cannot progress through the application without doing one of the two, either submitting the last 4 digits or checking the box no. That is one of our other integrity features. We didn't promote that. We didn't focus on that one within this webinar, but we do know from research that that's one of the common household mistakes, and it often causes applications to get kicked back as incomplete.
All right. We got a question about how do we get this web-based application onto our site online, and that's a good question, which as you can tell, as you know, the code that that we have provided is just the application code. There's no back-end database connected to it that would save information that's entered. There's no front end where a family would enter a login and be able to save their information or come back to it later, or there's none of those features attached to this right now. So if you wanted to use this, if you wanted to use the actual code from the application, those things would have to be added to it. And yes, you would have to find a website, or you would have to host it on a website. Probably, your school district's website would have a page for it or something. But, you need to access your IT department or, some other technical resources to get that set up for you.
Okay, here's another question. How is the USDA prototype handling child income? Do you also ask per child or only have a single income placeholder for all children? So our prototype actually splits out all of the children, and that way we're freeing the applicants from having to do any of the math, as well as the conversion for the frequency. If multiple children have income, or even if one child has income from different frequencies, all of those are handled by different questions. So child by child, income source by income source. The child income section really mirrors the adult income section. It's just not as robust, as there aren't as many income sources for child income. But the key point there is that it is broken out completely for each child, and the reasoning behind that is to get away from requiring the summation of income and any kind of conversion on behalf of the applicant. So we got a question. How does the school get the web-based application after it's completed? So the USDA's application is a model, it is a prototype, and it is not a national application. We're not collecting data. It doesn't have a backend. There's no database. It is a functional model of the integrity features that we're trying to promote as research-backed means of getting more complete and more accurate information from households. We didn't talk about language during this webinar, as we were focused on the income interview, but we did get a question here. Will the application be presented in different languages? So right now our application does support Spanish. It also has it can support other languages. The localization features are included, but the translations are not included as of yet. There are discussions occurring in terms of whether or not we're going to move forward with additional languages, but as of right now, English and Spanish are both included.
We got a question also about what we're tracking in our test environment, specifically how many parents begin the application but don't complete it. So just to reiterate, parents are not using the web-based prototype as it's where it is on the USDA website, and school districts should not be directing parents to fill it out there, because there's no protection of their information there. There's no privacy at all. So we don't want parents filling out the application on the demo site. But we are doing some testing with the Census Bureau. They have a cognitive research lab, and they're doing some usability testing on the application that won't look at, how many parents would start and not finish, but they'll be looking at other usability things like how many people were confused by a certain question, or how long did it take people to complete it, or those sorts of things. So we hope to have results from that in the coming months.
Oh, we have a question here. How does the online app deal with people that participate in public assistance programs like SNAP or TANF, and whether or not the application will verify the program numbers from those assistance programs, so like a SNAP case number. Our application does not do that, but that is something that could be built in. We've had discussions around that as well in terms of including that as an integrity feature. We recognize that that would be very helpful. The best way to go about doing that is to include it yourself, because case numbers can vary state to state. It would be better for you to have that feature programmed in to verify case numbers, at least in terms of a data field requirement. So if it's a certain number of characters long, working it into checking against some sort of a database that has all of the case numbers stored in it would be a whole nother thing that you might want to explore as well. There's a question here about where can we find the code. Currently the code is on the FNS website. It's available via a zip download file, but we are moving to GitHub. We got the green light to do that just this week, and we'll have that up and running as soon as possible, and make sure that we distribute news of that through our Gov delivery and possibly other means such as PartnerWeb.
Okay, we've got a couple of questions sort of to the effect of whether or not any of the features that we've talked about today are contingent on new guidance coming out, or whether or not there are any compatibility issues with existing policy. And I just want to take the opportunity to say definitively that when we designed our prototype and when we identified these integrity-oriented design features, we did that all within the bounds of existing policy. And so that is not an issue. You don't have to wait to implement any of these things. It's all fully compliant. That said, without going into too much detail about a work product that has not yet been released, we are aware that the fact that we now do have a web-based prototype means that we do have to update at least some of our language, and so there will be changes to the eligibility manual to reflect the fact that it does exist now. That said, when we released this, we did not change any policies in a substantive sense.
Thanks, Kevin. Here's a question about if the demo is available, or if there's any sort of a sample website where the application can be stepped through. And yes, we have published a functional demonstration. It is the application that the screenshots from this presentation came from, and that's available on our website. Feel free to email us if you're having trouble finding that website. Otherwise, we'll provide the link to that website as we distribute other all of the other materials from this webinar. We have a question here about how soon this web application can be implemented and how does the school go about doing that. So we released our prototype web application as well as its supporting materials in November, and we assumed that the soonest that anyone could get it into place would be school year 17-18, but it's really up to you. Well, we've actually already heard from some states and SFAs that they're promoting the very same integrity features that we discussed here today. But any district or state could take our code and build the supporting systems around it and put it into place as soon as they see fit. We got a question. Will Q&As from this webinar be available? Yes. We'll send out a compiled list of the Q&As, and we'll likely publish that on our website as well, along with the recording of this webinar. And that, although we do have more time, this is a appropriate time to mention that any questions that we don't get to during the webinar, we will answer and distribute those responses as well.
All right, we got a question about whether families can enter annual income in the application in our web-based prototype. That is not currently an option in the version 1.0 that we released, but FNS released an annual income memo in March, and we do plan to add that feature in the next release of the application. Not a policy change, but we just we didn't include it in this first version, and we will be adding it. Oh, yes, and Ed just reminded me too that just because it's not in our version right now doesn't mean that if you were to take our code that you couldn't add it yourself, or if you have a software vendor that you use that you couldn't ask them to add it as an option. And then another one that we got was even if we offer an online application, do we still have to have a paper application for those that don't have computer access? And the answer to that is yes, you still need to offer a paper application because, as the question acknowledges, not all people have internet or computer access. And just piggybacking on that, actually, before we get to the next question, just remember also that the web-based application that we made is mobile friendly, so that also helps with access for people that don't have desktop computers. They can use their smartphones, as a lot of online applications are these days. So there's a question that we currently have an online app. Does our vendor need to update the current version with the prototype that you're discussing? Like Tim said, none of these are requirements, but we do encourage you, if you want to see these things in your application, to contact your vendor and see if they can accommodate your request.
So we have a question here. What are you using to translate the application? Is it done through a professional service? The answer is yes. So far, our single translation of Spanish was performed through a professional service with native Spanish speakers. We did that intentionally because we had heard that from some of the usability testing during a challenge contest that we ran in the design phase of this prototype, that some of the automated translation, like drop-down services that are available right now aren't always accurate and can sometimes lead to confusing language. And we really spent a lot of time trying to make this application as friendly and welcoming as possible when it comes to the plain language used. So we wanted to preserve that in the translations as well.
We got a question about whether there is a list of approved vendors of online applications. And the answer to that is no, there's not. And if you go through a vendor for an application, we just encourage you to work with them to incorporate these features. So there's a question here that somebody is sharing that in their district they've had problems with parents not listing a step-parent on the application because they think that their income should not be listed as taking care of the child. And that's great feedback. It's, thanks for sharing that. And also, you know, if there's a known issue like that in your district, you're encouraged to add a little statement or a little help question in your application that says, you know, I'm a step parent. Do I still need to be listed on the application? Or, you know, you can create specific help topics or instructions or guidance that speak directly to problems that you've seen in your district. Obviously, that would just be a matter of, you know, working with either your IT department or your software vendor to see if you can get that sort of customization. And then also it is helpful to share that information with us as well, because as we do our research, you know, we won't make a change based on, you know, sort of one person's feedback, but, you know, as we gather information from people all over the country, once we hear something enough times, you know, it might be worth putting into, you know, the web-based prototype. So thank you for sharing. There's one about a designated time frame when these features need to be implemented, if there is one. And no, there's not. And like I just said, they're not actually even required. But we would encourage you to incorporate them as soon as possible. So we know that next year's application cycle is coming up soon. So if it's feasible, great. Otherwise, we would want to look to the future for when that's possible.
I think Whitney mentioned this, but the requirements in terms of the income sources, the applicable income sources, haven't changed. So the number of questions here, while these specific questions and this specific format aren't required, the income sources haven't changed at all. So those requirements aren't any different. It doesn't matter how an application categorizes them. What we've done is reduce the burden on the applicant by prompting them for each income source individually, so they no longer have to refer to instructions or call for assistance in terms of receiving any kind of explanation about what's in and what's out of each one of these categories. Instead, it's very clear, no more confusion about which income sources they should and shouldn't report. So we have a question, how would you prevent a school from altering the parent's information after it's been submitted? Are there safeguards built in? So that's actually something that would fall to a state or district, as our model prototype doesn't have any kind of a back end. There's no data stored. We haven't handled any kind of data integrity other than what's handled by the form itself and the process that the applicant goes through when filling out the form. In terms of data storage and access to the data, that's all back end, and that would fall to the district or the IT vendor or the state, whoever's handling the actual database or the development of the database.
All right, there's a question about will there be one of these for CACFP? And that's a good question. There's not right now, and there's not one in the works, but thank you for the question. And I guess the question is only asked because you're interested in having one. So we'd actually be interested, the email address that's on the screen right now, we'd be interested in hearing sort of what your thoughts are on that, or how that would work or be used. So we'd love to hear from you if you want to send us a little bit more information to our email. There was a question about how the child income in the web-based application is handled in relationship to the paper application template that shows a single income field for all children. And Tim touched on this during the presentation, but just to reiterate, on the USDA prototype and on most paper applications I've seen, there is just a single field for child income. So if there are more than one kids in the house that earn income, you would have to do some math in order to fill that out. But the distinction that Tim was talking about in the web-based prototype is that each child is asked about their income separately. So there's no math required on the part of the applicant, which we see as an important integrity aspect.
Just got a question about if children that are directly certified still have to fill out an online application. And the answer is no. The publication of our online web-based prototype hasn't changed any rules when it comes to direct certification or those children that are directly certified, whether or not they have to apply via an application.
So there's a question about resources to support the documentation of the determining, the confirming, and or the verifying official. And similar to the sort of data processing integrity, the security things that would be handled on a back end or post application, that similarly is in the same boat. Those are data points that would be captured after an applicant has already filled out the application. So that's not something that is offered in the code that we've put out. So if you would like to have that feature, you should work with your IT department or your software vendor to get that capability. We got a question about why the USDA has not updated its paper application to follow the same integrity process.
I guess what we would start by saying is the paper application, USDA recently updated that. That's actually the first of the integrity improvements that we've made in the application process in the last couple of years. That was recently redesigned with input from our partners at Office of Personnel Management Innovation Lab. That was a process that took advantage of human-centered design expertise at that facility, was designed with input from focus groups and other users, as well as the experts in form design and layout. The goal was to optimize an application for a piece of paper, and in fact a piece of paper that is just a single piece of paper, front and back. Clearly, the method of querying the applicants for their income on our web-based application is different, would not fit on a piece of paper. What might happen in the future to web-based or to paper application design is a question for the future. But at this point, we're at least in this webinar, we don't have a whole lot more to add on what's happening with the paper application. Anyway, we believe that's a well-designed product for the paper format.
I'd like to add on to that by saying that a district or a state is more than welcome to promote including these integrity features within their paper application. And if anyone has any great ideas on how to do that, we'd love to see and discuss about those great ideas. Or if you've already seen some paper applications out there that have included some enhanced integrity features, let us know. Send it to us. As we've said a few times already, our inbox is right there on the screen. So send us an email, attach something, and we'd love to take a look. So we've got about 3 minutes left I'm going to do a last call for questions. There are some outstanding questions that we will send written responses out to everybody with. I want to thank everyone for coming, attending, participating, and asking all these great questions. And I'll just repeat myself here again by saying that all of the webinar materials, including the Q&As, will be ready and available for all of you to view and to use. Don't forget to check out our website and the resources that accompany our prototype application. And while you're there, demo the integrity features. And if you have any questions that you didn't have an opportunity to ask during the webinar, send us an email. Or if you have any questions after you've reviewed our resources or played with the demonstration, get in contact with us. Okay, it seems like the last few questions that came in, we won't be able to have enough time to answer them. They are really good questions, pretty big questions. So we'll have to get back to all of you in writing. Apologies for not being able to cover everyone's questions, but as I said, we'll make sure that everyone gets written responses to everything we went over today and those questions that we did not. So thank you so much for attending. And we hope to hear from you soon at our web app inbox.